Anima. Bird and bear. Oh, just I'm a bear cat. I'm beautiful bear cat. Amen. Type. How? Jim Fan.